One of our viewers asked, please show how to use your brush to suggest leaves on trees in the foreground and the midground. Well, it's not about moving the brush, it's all about the texture. So we talk a lot about brush strokes, and we expect the brush strokes to do everything for us, but without recognizing what we're looking at in the way of, is it shape, is it texture, is it a mass of color? Well, then brush strokes are not going to mean anything. They're just going to be absolutely nothing but brush strokes. So let's look at what we're talking about. I have a little picture here, example. This is a tree that's just about as close to us as we would be able to get to a large oak tree. Well, not necessarily. We could walk right up. And if we walked right up to it, we wouldn't be able to see the whole tree. Then we would see just leaves. That would be shapes. But when we're back away from it enough to see the whole tree, those shapes turn into textures. And those textures are created with values, lights and darks, shadows and not in shadows. Now, the ones that are closest to us are going to have a deeper shadow contrast, or light and dark contrast, a stronger, I should say, light and dark contrast. As they move into distance, the same trees, not quite so much. So let me just give you a brief little demonstration here and show you what we're talking about. Okay, so we've got to first of all look at this in terms of what's in shadow, what's not in shadow. So I'll just take just a brief, just a very small section here of one bough. We could take any bough here, but I'll just take one. First of all, what's in shadow? Well, let's first of all, let's just do a quick little sketch. So this might be the bough right here. This might be the shape of this particular bough right here. Just sort of like that. That's the shape of this area right in here. It's necessary to see that if you want to communicate trees, if you want to communicate leaves on trees. Need to see that, need to see those shapes, need to see that in shadow and not in shadow. So that would be that shape of that bough. Now, what's in shadow? What's in shadow? So I'll go, first of all, I'll just go directly into that. I'll go, that seems to be relatively deep shadow right there, so I'll just go into the green. Let's see, quite green. It's kind of bluish green. It goes a little bit more less intense, not quite so much saturation. So right here in this section, here's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing a shadow portion that does something like this. The shape of that shadow right here, you see it? The shape of that shadow does something like this, and that's important. Of course, the shape of the shadow around it is going to also determine how we see that. So I have a shadow shape down here, and I'll just sort of block that in very quickly here. So we have a shadow shape down here, and we have another shadow shape in here, and so on. As we go up, we have a shadow shape at the top. So as we begin to look throughout that entire oak tree, we see that we have a sequence of shadow, not in shadow, shadow, not in shadow. We've got to see that as shadow and not in shadow as our first step. So I'm just going to kind of block this in like that, not necessarily trying to do the whole thing for you. So that's what's in shadow. What's not in shadow? What's not in shadow is the next step of that. And what I see as not in shadow is another pattern. It's a pattern that goes a little bit lighter. See this section right in here, a pattern that goes a little bit lighter. In this case, it's not in really direct, strong light, so it's kind of a low light. So there we go. And then now here's where we begin to sort of define the strokes. We see a movement going this way, so we would just put our stroke in here and move it that way. We move the strokes according to what we see as in shadow and not in shadow. So if I see this kind of pattern, that's what I'm making, in shadow, and not in shadow, just like that. Now this what I'm showing you now is what I'm seeing in this tree that is closer up. So we'll just sort of let the brush move in the direction like this in the pattern that I'm seeing that those shapes as shadow and not in shadow. Now, the ones here in the distance, I'm going to come back to this in just a moment, but just very briefly, in the distance what we see there is we see those that are furthest away from us, the shadow portion, say of this shape right here, the shadow portion is a little bit lighter. So always look for that. As it moves into the distance, the shadow portion is a little bit lighter. The not in shadow portion, well, we just look for it. It varies. There's no way I can give you a real formula for that. But when it's not in shadow, it's going to be it's going to be lighter than the shadow portion, but the degree of contrast between this and this is going to be a little closer. So the not in shadow portion, I always like to say not in shadow because that indicates those halftones there that we see in the distance. So this, now there we go, there's a not in shadow, and there's the in shadow in what we would see as it goes in the distance. Now what happens here is that here we've got more value contrast. Here we're going to see it more like a stronger texture of shape. We'll see a little bit of shape, but we'll see more texture. As it moves in the distance here, we're going to see less texture. As it moves into the great distance, it's going to fall out, and we're not going to see any texture at all in trees that move into the great distance. So let's look at what we'll do right here. Now when we're up close to us, what we do is we look at those in shadow areas first of all, and we see what variation do you see on the in shadow areas. So in the in shadow areas, and this is where you begin to move your brush according to what you see. In that variation of the in shadow area, you will probably see just a little bit of value difference, like right here. And if you go back to the we have a quick tip on the foliage structure, I believe it's called. If you go back to that quick tip, then you'll know what to do here from here on. So in shadow, you would use your brush to define just the value differences that you see in shadow. And let's see, right in here, see a little bit of value difference in shadow. In this one, you don't see that much value difference in shadow. You'll see just a little bit of value difference in shadow, but not very much at all. So that's what you look for. This one's got a closer contrast, not quite so strong in contrast. The one that's closer to you has got the stronger contrast. Now let's look at how we look at not in shadow. In not in shadow, you look for how many values do you see not in shadow. So right in here we see not in shadow, not very light yet. We see not in shadow. That's where the light's shining, and we will begin to give just those strokes that imitate that movement we see not in shadow. Here, you see it a little bit stronger on the tips right over here. Let me just pull my brush in here. Now, people have different ways of maneuvering their brushes when they're painting leaf strokes or whatever else. The important thing is that you read the value. If you read the value and the color correctly, then how you move your brush will become more like your handwriting. And here we go. There's the not in shadow. Now you see that in the not in shadow where the light is shining, you're going to have some areas like right over there, some areas where the light is shining a little bit stronger, and some areas where the light won't hit it so strongly, and that will be, these areas are more like halftones. It begins to fall out of light and into shadow. On the one in the mid distance, you don't see that quite so strongly. That's what you look for. So the one in the mid distance, you won't have very much definition at all. You'll have the values very close. You see, like I'm doing here. Just keep the values very close, just about a single value difference. And you'll see it right there. Just about a single value difference where it's not in shadow. and just about a single value difference where it is in shadow. And you can see here, the photographs will show us that more strongly than we see them when we're there. So the stronger value contrast where it's closer to you, the not quite so strong value contrast as it moves into distance. You get the in shadow values and the not in shadow values established first. Don't depend upon brush strokes until you reach the point where you're then beginning to find the difference between the lights and the darks. And I would always say, look at the subject, squint at it, and ask yourself, what mark do I know how to make that will tell me what that is telling me? So if that shape is moving like this, making a mark like that, then that's how you'll move your brush, like that. So don't depend upon a formula for moving your brush. The lights and darks are going to tell everything, but how you move your brush in those lights and darks tells you everything about how you want that to be interpreted. So just look at the subject. What mark does that suggest to you that you make with your brush? And that should pretty much answer you as far as how you would make the leaves or communicate foliage in trees up close and in trees in the mid distance. And I hope that was helpful to you. If you find it was, if you have something that you would like for me to address, leave a comment right down here. We'll put you on the schedule. And check out our full-length videos at dynamize.com. Read the descriptions, read the titles, and see if you find something there that might be of interest. And there's your quick tip.